Felix Stanton didn't fall often. He was one of those men who didn't just walk into a room. He owned it. But on a random Thursday morning, in the middle of Manhattan's most chaotic hospital lobby, he slipped on a freshly mopped floor and went crashing straight toward the ground like gravity had a personal vendetta against him. And the only thing that stopped him from face-planting was a pair of surprisingly strong arms. "Whoa, I got you," a woman's voice gasped. He blinked, dazed, as he found himself half sitting, half sprawled across the floor, but very much in the protective grip of a woman wearing teal scrubs. Her hair was tied up in a messy ponytail, a few auburn strands clinging to her flushed cheeks. Her eyes were wide, concerned, and way too green to be real. "You okay?" she asked, one hand still gripping his arm tightly. Felix blinked again. His pride was bruised, his elbow throbbed, and his ego had just been body slammed in front of a crowd. But somehow, all he could focus on was the woman kneeling beside him with her hand still on his shoulder. "I think so," he muttered. "That floor's out for blood." She let out a short laugh, then stood and offered him her hand. "Come on, let's get you up before someone steps over you." He took her hand, small, warm, calloused in a way that said she worked hard, and let her pull him to his feet. Once upright, he noticed she was shorter than him by at least a head, but somehow she still looked like she could throw him across the lobby if she needed to. "Thanks," he said, brushing himself off. "No problem," she replied, already glancing down to check his elbow. "You hit this pretty hard." "Want me to take a look? I'm a nurse." He opened his mouth to decline, but the way her brow furrowed in genuine concern made him nod instead. "Sure." She led him to a nearby bench and gently rolled up the sleeve of his suit jacket. "You're lucky, it's just a bruise." "No blood, no major swelling." "Good," he said. "I was hoping to avoid the ER. I have a meeting in 20 minutes. She said, tilting her head. "You might want to reschedule. You just fell. That's a traumatic experience." "Some people never recover." He looked at her, unsure if she was joking, until he saw the sparkle in her eyes. "Are you making fun of me?" he asked. "Only a little," she said, smiling. "I've never seen a man in a $1,000 suit go down that fast." He raised a brow. "You know suits?" "I know enough to know that's not off the rack," she replied, then extended her hand again. "Tessa Andrews, ER nurse, floor savior." He shook her hand. "Felix Stanton, CEO, floor victim." Her eyes flicked up. "Stanton, as in Stanton Holdings." He tried not to react. Most people didn't recognize him immediately, and he preferred it that way. "That's me," he said casually. "Well, Mr. Stanton," she said, standing back, "watch where you're going next time. The floor's not always going to be that forgiving." He stood too, brushing off the last of the embarrassment. "I'll keep that in mind. Thanks again for catching me," she shrugged, already turning to walk away. "Any time." Felix watched her go, her ponytail bouncing as she moved through the crowd like she belonged to the chaos. He'd had hundreds of meetings, thousands of polished conversations with polished people in polished buildings. But that 30-second exchange with a nurse in a hospital lobby had left more of an impression than most of those combined, and he had no idea why. The next day, Felix walked into the hospital again. He told himself it was for a follow-up with the orthopedic specialist one floor up, but that didn't explain why he found himself lingering by the ER wing, scanning for a flash of auburn hair she didn't show. The day after that, he came again. This time, he made it a point to ask one of the nurses as subtly as he could. "Is Tessa working today?" The nurse raised a brow. "You mean Andrews?" "Nah, she's on night shifts this week." "Night shifts, right." That night, Felix canceled dinner with a banking executive and showed up at the hospital at 9 p.m. Holding 2 coffees, he wasn't entirely sure what he was doing. He didn't chase women. He didn't show up uninvited. And he definitely didn't hang around hospitals after hours for a woman he'd talked to once. But then he saw her. Tessa was at the nurse's station, scribbling something into a chart. Her hair was up again, and she looked tired but focused, moving with the same confidence that had impressed him the moment she caught him mid-fall. He approached slowly. "Thought you might need caffeine," he said, holding up the coffee. She looked up, surprised. "Mr. Stanton, you okay?" "Fall into another floor," he chuckled. "Not yet." She eyed the coffee, then him. Are you stalking me? Would it make you feel better if I said yes? She tilted her head. Honestly, a little. He handed her a coffee. Long shift always is, she said, taking the cup. You didn't have to bring this. I wanted to, he said simply. She gave him a look like she was trying to figure him out. Guys like you don't usually hang around here, let alone twice in a week. Felix leaned against the counter. Maybe I don't want to be like most guys. She sipped the coffee. Careful, that sounds dangerously close to a line, he smiled. It's not a line if it's true. They talked for nearly 20 minutes, her break stretching longer than it should have. They talked about his job, her patience, the insanity of New York, and how she once got locked in a supply closet for 2 hours during a power outage. She made him laugh, really laugh in a way he hadn't in months. She wasn't impressed by his money or his name. She wasn't trying to get anything from him. She was just herself. By the time she had to get back to work, he found himself not wanting to leave. Let me take you to dinner, he said before she walked away. She blinked. I mean it, he added. A real dinner. Not just coffee in a hospital hallway. Tessa looked at him for a long second. You're serious? Very, she hesitated, then finally said, fine, but only if you promise not to fall again. He grinned. Deal. That night, walking back to his car, Felix realized something. He'd slipped on a wet floor, and somehow, in the most unexpected way, fallen much harder for the woman who caught him. Tessa stood outside the restaurant, shifting her weight from one foot to the other, mentally debating whether she should just turn around and walk away. The place was the kind of upscale she only ever passed on her way to the subway, the kind with no prices on the menu, and a valet who glanced at her beat-up sneakers like they'd committed a crime. Felix had insisted on picking her up, but she declined. She wasn't quite ready to be chauffeured around in whatever luxury vehicle he likely had parked somewhere in a private garage. She needed the control that came with walking herself to the front door, or walking away if she changed her mind, but she didn't walk away. The moment she stepped into the softly lit restaurant, the ambient hum of conversation and clink of glasses wrapped around her like silk. A hostess in a sleek black jumpsuit greeted her with practiced elegance. Miss Andrews? Tessa blinked. Yeah, this way, please. She followed the hostess toward a secluded corner where Felix sat alone at a table set with flickering candles and polished silverware. He stood when he saw her, and for a moment the room dimmed around him. He was wearing a charcoal suit with a crisp white shirt, no tie, and his dark hair was swept back in a way that made him look like he belonged on the cover of a magazine. You came, he said, smiling, not the kind of smile meant to impress, but something quieter, more personal. You said dinner, she replied, sliding into the chair across from him. I assume this isn't a prank, not unless you count the wine list. It's in French and I'm positive half of it is made up, she laughed, easing into the chair. A waiter appeared like magic to pour water and offer menus, which Felix waved away politely. I already ordered, he said. I hope that's okay. I asked the chef to prepare something he thought you'd like. Is he psychic? No, Felix said, leaning forward, but I told him you work nights and don't have time for pretense. So something comforting, with flavor and no edible flowers. Tessa tilted her head. That was. Weirdly thoughtful? I figured you'd had enough chaos for 1 week. You deserve to be taken care of. She studied him, unsure what to do with that statement. She was used to people needing her, not the other way around. Most people don't care what I deserve, she said. Then most people are idiots. Their food arrived moments later, grilled sea bass with roasted vegetables for her and some kind of perfectly seared steak for him. They ate slowly, not because of the food, but because the conversation kept tumbling forward faster than either of them expected. What made you go into nursing? He asked between bites. She chewed thoughtfully before answering. My mom got sick when I was in high school, cancer. I spent a lot of time in hospitals watching people either turn away or step up. The nurses were the ones who stayed. They didn't blink when things got messy. I wanted to be like that. Felix didn't interrupt. He just listened, his expression unreadable but attentive. She passed a few weeks before my graduation, Tessa added. I almost didn't go to college. But I figured if I could survive that, I could survive anything. You did more than survive, he said. You built something? She shrugged, uncomfortable with praise, and nudged a piece of asparagus around her plate. What about you? Why finance? I was good at math and bad at emotions, Felix said. Wall Street rewards that kind of imbalance. She raised an eyebrow. That's not exactly a glowing endorsement. It's not. I built Stanton Holdings because I liked control, predictable outcomes, but lately, I'm starting to think I traded a lot of life for certainty. Tessa sipped her water, letting the silence stretch long enough to make room for honesty. You ever think about quitting? She asked. Every day, he replied, but I don't know what I'd do instead. I've spent the last 20 years trying to be the man everyone expected me to be. I'm not sure who I'd be if I stopped. You'd still be the guy who brought a nurse coffee on her night shift, she said softly. Felix looked at her, something shifting in his eyes. You remember that? I remember everything, she said. It's kind of my curse. They left the restaurant an hour later, full but not quite ready to part. Felix offered to walk her to the subway and she didn't object. The city pulsed around them, honking horns, flashing lights, the distant wail of a siren, but it all felt muted somehow. You know, she said as they passed a florist locking up for the night, you're not what I expected. What did you expect? Someone colder, sharper, less human? I was all those things, Felix said, until about 5 days ago. They stopped at the subway entrance. Tessa turned to face him. I'm not looking for anything complicated, she said. My life's already a mess most days. I work 70 hours a week. I pay rent late sometimes. I haven't taken a vacation in 3 years. I don't care about any of that, he said. Complicated doesn't scare me. Losing a chance to know you, that scares me. She hesitated, then leaned up and kissed him. It wasn't dramatic or staged. Just a quiet meeting of lips in the middle of a city that didn't stop for anyone. When she pulled back, she looked a little startled by herself. I don't usually do that. I'm glad you did, Felix said, his voice low. She stepped back, hands in her coat pockets. Good night, Felix. Good night, Tessa. The next morning, he sent a single white envelope to the hospital's main reception desk with her name scrawled across it. Inside was a handwritten note. Dinner was the best meeting I've had in years. Let me see you again. No pressure, no planning, just you. A week passed, and they fell into a rhythm: short phone calls during her breaks, long texts when the hospital slowed down, stolen minutes when she could sneak away from her shift. Felix never pushed. He didn't try to impress her with money or connections. He simply showed up in the quiet ways that mattered. One night, she came home to find a box on her doorstep. No card, no logo. Inside was a worn, used copy of one of her favorite books, The Things They Carried. A note was tucked between the pages. You mentioned once you'd lost your old copy in a move. I tracked one down. Hope it finds its way back to you. She stared at the note for a long time, heart pounding in a way she didn't like to admit. That same night, Felix sat alone in his penthouse, watching the city from the floor-to-ceiling windows. He could buy anything, fly anywhere, but all he wanted was to hear her voice. He picked up his phone and dialed. Hey, she answered, breathless, clearly mid-run. Am I interrupting? Just chasing a psych patient down the hall, nothing major. You always call that a normal Tuesday, pretty much. Then I guess I'm just trying to make your normal a little better, he said. There was a pause, then a quiet laugh. You kind of already are. Felix didn't reply. He didn't need to. He just listened as she caught her breath and told him about her night, and for the first time in a long time, he didn't feel like the man with the power. He felt like the one being saved. The rain had started as a whisper, a light drizzle that barely touched the surface of the sidewalks. But by the time Tessa stepped out of the hospital's side entrance, it was pouring in thick silver sheets, soaking her hoodie and sneakers before she made it past the ambulance bay. She hunched her shoulders, pulled her hood tighter, and began walking, refusing to let the weather ruin her last 10 minutes of peace before the world demanded more of her. A black SUV idled by the curb under the faint glow of a flickering street lamp. Its passenger window lowered as she passed. Tessa? She paused, rain dripping from her lashes, and turned toward the sound. Felix leaned across the seat, dry in a tailored black coat, his eyes finding hers through the downpour. You're going to catch pneumonia, he said. I've had worse, she replied, blinking water from her eyes. What are you doing here? I had a meeting nearby, he said, and I couldn't stop thinking about you. You could have called. I didn't want to talk through a phone. Get in. She hesitated, heart thudding in her chest, then yanked the door open and climbed inside. The warmth hit her immediately, fogging her glasses and making her painfully aware of just how soaked she was. There's a towel, he said, nodding toward the back seat. She reached for it, patting her face and arms. Her fingers trembled slightly, though she couldn't tell if it was from the cold or his proximity. You really didn't have to come all the way here, she said. I know, he said, but I wanted to. She turned to study him. His jaw was tighter than usual, shadows under his eyes deeper. Rough day? She asked. He looked out the windshield for a moment before answering. My board voted against a proposal I spent 3 months developing. They want faster returns, more aggressive expansion. I want something sustainable. They think I've gone soft. Have you? Maybe, he said. But I don't like building things that hurt people. Not anymore. She watched the rain trail down the windows, thoughts spinning. You ever think, she said slowly, that maybe you're supposed to be doing something else? I think about it all the time, he said, but I've built an empire. Walking away would mean burning it down. And what if it's worth burning? He didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached into the glove compartment and pulled out a folded piece of paper. He handed it to her. She opened it. A blueprint. A building. Low rise, clean lines, open courtyards. What is this? A shelter, community run. Housing for women and families coming out of crisis. I've been funding smaller programs for years, but this would be the first full-scale facility under my name. She looked up. Under your name, he nodded. I kept it quiet. I didn't want the board interfering. Tessa's throat tightened. Why are you showing me this? Because I'm tired of pretending I'm only one thing, he said. And because you're the first person I've met in a long time who sees past the surface. I wanted you to know the truth. She folded the paper carefully and handed it back. You're not who I expected either. They sat in silence, the hum of the rain filling the space between them. Finally, Felix turned to her. Come with me this weekend, he said. Where? Vermont. I have a property upstate. It's quiet, no cell towers, just trees and silence. Tessa raised an eyebrow. You want to take me to the woods, he laughed, the tension in his shoulders easing slightly. It's not like that. There's a house with heat and wine. And a kitchen I don't know how to use, she tilted her head. Why me? Because you don't need anything from me, he said. And that makes me want to give you everything. Her breath caught in her throat. The words were simple, but they landed like a thunderclap in her chest. I have a shift Friday night, she said. Then I'll pick you up Saturday morning. She hesitated, then nodded. Okay. That Saturday, the sky was a crisp blue, the city still shaking off the weight of the previous night's storm. Tessa met him outside her apartment just after dawn, a duffel bag in hand and her hair still damp from a rushed shower. Felix opened the passenger door for her, stepping aside as she climbed into the SUV. You packed light, he said when he got in. I don't own anything fancy, she replied. Good, neither do the trees. The drive took 3 hours, winding through highways that gave way to quiet backroads lined with flaming orange and gold leaves. Neither of them spoke much. There was no need. The silence felt comfortable, like a pause in the noise of their separate lives. The house he brought her to wasn't a mansion or a palace. It was a modern cabin, all wood and glass, perched on a hill that overlooked a wide valley. Inside, it smelled like cedar and something faintly floral. I bought it after my father died, he said, showing her around. I needed somewhere that didn't feel like Manhattan. She ran her fingers along the edge of a bookshelf filled with hardbacks. Did he die recently? 5 years ago, he said, but grief doesn't keep a schedule. They spent the day walking trails, their boots crunching over fallen leaves. He told her about growing up in a house where emotions were currency and love wasn't spoken but negotiated. She told him about her first job at a clinic where the air conditioning broke every summer and the pay barely covered rent, but where she'd learned more than any textbook could teach her. That night they sat on the back deck, wrapped in blankets, a fire pit crackling between them. Stars blinked above them in a sky so clear it felt unreal. I don't think I've slowed down in years, Tessa said, leaning back in her chair. You should, he said. You deserve to breathe. She turned to look at him. Do you always say things like that? only when I mean them. And then he kissed her. It wasn't a rushed thing. It was slow, reverent, like he was afraid to break whatever fragile thread had been weaving between them. Her hands found his shoulders, his fingers tangled in her hair, and the world slipped away. Later, wrapped in a blanket on the floor in front of the fireplace, she traced the scar on his forearm. "How did you get this?" she asked. "Fell off a bike when I was 12. "Tried to jump a ramp I made out of a trash can," she laughed quietly. "Brilliant. I bled all over a brand new leather jacket. My mother was more upset about the coat than my arm." Tessa rested her head against his chest. "You didn't have a soft childhood, did you?" "No," he said. "But my life feels softer now." The words hung between them, weighty and real. In the morning, she woke before him and wandered into the kitchen. The mountains stretched across the horizon, bathed in gold light. She poured coffee and stood by the window, watching the mist rise off the trees. Felix appeared behind her, shirt rumpled, hair a mess. He wrapped his arms around her from behind. "I could get used to this," he murmured. She leaned into him. "Don't. Why not?" "Because I don't want to get used to something that won't last." He turned her gently to face him. "What if it could?" Tessa searched his face. There was no game there, no performance. Just a man who'd built everything except a place to belong. "You mean that?" "I do," he said, "but I don't want to rush you." "I'm not afraid of fast," she said. "I'm afraid of fake." "I'm not offering something fake," she nodded slowly. "Then let's see where this goes." They returned to the city that evening, the silence between them not heavy but full. Something had shifted permanently, but neither of them said it aloud, not yet. Because some truths weren't spoken. They were lived. Felix stepped onto the rooftop of the unfinished building just as the first pink hues of dawn crept across the Manhattan skyline. The city was waking up below, but up here it was silent, peaceful. The distant hum of traffic was muffled by open sky, and the wind carried the scent of rain from the night before. He'd been coming to this site every morning for the past week, watching the structure rise from the foundation up. The shelter wasn't finished yet, but the bones were their steel beams, concrete floors, and the promise of something lasting. Something real. He walked to the edge, staring out at the horizon, one hand in his coat pocket. He hadn't told Tessa yet. Not about the groundbreaking ceremony scheduled for next month, or the fact that he'd named the center after her mother Margaret's house. He didn't want it to be a gesture. He wanted it to be a legacy. Footsteps behind him broke the quiet. He turned, expecting his assistant or the project manager. But it was Tessa. "You have a habit of showing up in places I don't expect," he said. "I could say the same about you," she replied, her hair pulled back in a loose braid, fatigue clinging to her features. "I thought you were on shift. I traded with someone. Figured it was time I saw what you've been hiding." Felix stepped aside, letting her take in the view. She moved slowly, her eyes scanning the unfinished space. "This is it?" she asked. "The shelter," he nodded. "Top floor will be administrative offices. Everything else, housing, counseling, medical care, child care, will be downstairs. Open access, no red tape." She turned toward him. "Why didn't you tell me you already started?" "Because I didn't want it to be about me," he said. "I wanted it to be something that stands whether I'm in the picture or not." Tessa walked to one of the exposed beams and rested her hand against it. "This is going to matter." "I hope so," he said. "It needs to." She looked up. "I got an offer yesterday, a position at a trauma unit in Chicago. Higher pay, better hours." His chest tightened. "Are you considering it?" "I was," she said, "but then I remembered something." "What?" "That every time I've run from something, I've regretted it." Felix stepped closer. "Is this about me?" "It's about what we're building," she said, her voice low. "Not just this place, us. I don't want to walk away before I've given it a real chance." He reached for her hand. "Then don't." She let their fingers intertwine. "If I stay, I need to know this isn't temporary." "It's not." "There are going to be hard days," she said. "I'm not the kind of woman who fits into your world without friction." "I don't want you to fit into it," he said. "I want to build a new one." "Around us?" Tessa's eyes searched his face as if weighing the truth in his words. Then she nodded. "Okay." They stood there, fingers linked, the city stretching out beneath them like a promise. The next few weeks moved fast. Felix's board pushed back against his plans to fund the shelter independently. citing concerns about image and liability. He didn't flinch. Instead, he called a press conference. Tessa stood behind the cameras, arms folded, watching as he stepped up to the podium on the steps of City Hall. "This is not a business venture," Felix said into the sea of microphones. "It's not a tax strategy or a publicity stunt. It's a commitment to people who have been overlooked, to lives that deserve more. If that makes me a liability to my own company, then so be it." Headlines exploded the next day. Some praised him, others called him reckless, but none of it mattered. Because later that night, Tessa pulled him into her apartment, wrapped her arms around him, and whispered, "You did the right thing." 3 days after that, he found her standing in the middle of an empty retail space downtown, staring at the high ceilings and bare brick walls. "What is this?" he asked. "I want to open a clinic," she said. "Sliding scale, walk-ins only, no insurance barriers, just care." He looked around. "You're serious?" "I am." Felix stepped behind her, rested his hands on her shoulders. "Then let's do it." They spent the next month knee-deep in permits, inspections, and donor calls. Felix handled the business side. Tessa assembled a team: nurses, physician assistants, even a retired paramedic who'd volunteered to run intake. Every night, they collapsed into each other's arms, exhausted but exhilarated. It wasn't perfect. They argued about logistics, about timing, about how much of themselves they were giving away. But every disagreement ended the same way, with one of them reaching across the silence and saying, "We'll figure it out." One Friday afternoon, Felix walked into the clinic to find Tessa crouched by a corner wall, painting a mural with soft, steady strokes. "You're supposed to be on a call with the contractor," he said. "I rescheduled," she replied, dabbing a brush into a pot of blue. "This was more important." He stepped closer. The mural was abstract, a swirl of color and motion, but at its center was the faint outline of 2 hands just barely touching. "It's beautiful," he said. "I wanted it to feel like hope." He crouched beside her. "You've changed me." She paused, brush hovering mid-air. "How? I used to think power meant control. Now I think it means choosing what you stand for." Tessa set the brush down and turned to face him. "And what do you stand for now?" "You." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Tessa's breath caught. "I didn't plan to do this here," he said. "I thought maybe a rooftop dinner or some extravagant thing with champagne and fireworks, but that's not us. This paint stained jeans and chaos and purpose, this is us." He opened the box. Inside was a ring, simple, classic, with a single diamond set in gold. "I love you," he said. "Not because you saved me when I fell, but because you've shown me who I want to be when I stand." Tessa stared at the ring, then at him. Her eyes glistened, but she didn't blink. "I don't need promises," she said. "I need truth." "Then here's the truth," Felix said. "I want to build the rest of my life with you, every messy, beautiful second of it." She reached for the ring, then for his hand. "Then let's build it." The wedding was small. Just 30 people in the courtyard of the shelter on the day it opened. Tessa wore ivory linen and walked down the aisle barefoot. Felix wore a navy suit without a tie, his hair slightly windswept from the breeze. They said their vows with trembling voices and steady eyes. After the ceremony, Tessa stood on the porch of Margaret's house, watching as a line of families waited to be welcomed inside. Felix slipped his arm around her waist. "You know, I almost didn't go to the hospital that day," she leaned into him, "and I almost let you fall." He laughed softly. "You did more than catch me. You caught me too," she said. And in that moment, with the city behind them and a future unspooling at their feet, neither of them needed to say anything else. They had fallen unexpectedly and risen together. The first snowfall of the season blanketed the city in white, softening the harsh edges of Manhattan's skyline and muting the usual clamor of traffic and sirens. From the wide windows of their apartment, once Felix's penthouse, now theirs, Tessa watched flakes swirl like confetti, coffee mug cupped between her hands. She wore one of his sweaters, sleeves bunched at the wrists, and her hair was still damp from the shower. Behind her, Felix adjusted the collar of his shirt with one hand while scanning a document in the other. He looked as put together as ever, but something in the set of his jaw gave him away. "Cancel it," she said without turning. He looked up. "What? The meeting?" "Cancel it?" He placed the papers on the table and crossed to her. "It's with the board. They're expecting a full proposal on the divestment plan." She finally looked at him. "You've already made the decision. You're stepping down as CEO. You've handed over operations. Why are you still giving them pieces of yourself?" He sighed, tugging gently at the knot of his tie before letting it hang loose. "Because it's hard to let go of something you built from nothing." "You didn't build it alone," she said. "And it won't fall apart without you." He rested his hands on her hips. "You always know when I need the push." "That's because you've stopped pretending with me." He pulled her closer. "I don't want to go." "Then don't." She kissed him, slow and lingering, and he exhaled against her mouth like he hadn't realized he'd been holding his breath. They spent the rest of the morning curled on the couch, the world outside their windows fading into white silence. Tessa's phone buzzed once, an alert from the clinic about a new patient intake, but she ignored it. For now, their world was smaller than the city, quieter than the headlines that still hadn't stopped printing Felix's name in bold. He no longer read them. Neither did she. Later that afternoon, they visited Margaret's house together. The air buzzed with laughter and warmth. Children darted through the halls, volunteers decorated a pine tree in the common room, and the smell of cinnamon drifted from the kitchen where a group of residents was baking cookies. Felix knelt to help a boy tie his shoelaces. The kid was maybe 6, gap-toothed, with sleeves too long for his arms. Tessa watched him, a tug in her chest she hadn't expected. "You're good with him," she said once the boy had run off. Felix stood, brushing off his knees. "He reminds me of me. Back when I didn't have anyone to talk to." She laced her fingers through his. "You have people now." They toured the new wing, still under construction but nearly complete. Tessa pointed out where the triage area would be, how the exam rooms would be organized, and mentioned a local pediatrician who'd reached out to volunteer. Felix stayed quiet until they reached the far corner, where the break room would eventually be. "I want us to work here," he said. "Together. I want to be part of this with you." "You already are." "No, I mean, fully, not as a donor or a name on a plaque. I want to show up, take calls, paint walls, whatever you need." She smiled. "You're not exactly qualified for drywall installation." He tugged her gently toward him. "But I'm excellent at coffee runs." "Are you sure?" she asked. "This isn't just a side project. It's messy, it's exhausting, it's not glamorous." "I'm sure," he said. "Because every day I spent in boardrooms and behind desks felt like I was waiting for something to matter. And this," he gestured around them, "this matters." She rested her head against his chest. "You're going to be terrible at keeping office hours. I plan to break every rule you make." They left the building as the sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the city. Felix paused at the doorway, glancing back once. "I want to start a foundation," he said out of nowhere. "Use the Stanton name to fund more places like this in other cities, rural areas, wherever they're needed." Tessa looked up at him. "Then let's do it." He turned and kissed her forehead. "You make me believe I can." That night, they hosted a small gathering at the clinic. Staff, volunteers, patients, everyone was invited. An impromptu holiday party, thrown together with mismatched tablecloths, store-bought cupcakes, and more joy than most black tie galas ever managed. Tessa stood beside the front desk, watching a nurse teach a toddler how to dance while a teenage girl helped string lights across the ceiling. Felix was in the corner helping carry in folding chairs, laughing at something one of the residents said. She felt a hand slip into hers. "You okay?" he asked. She nodded. "Just full." He wrapped his arm around her waist. "It's only the beginning." 2 weeks later, they stood in a judge's chambers, snow still clinging to their boots. There was no fanfare, no aisle, no bouquet. Just the two of them, a legal formality and a quiet vow spoken with hands clasped and eyes locked. When the judge pronounced them married, Tessa laughed sharp and sudden and threw her arms around Felix's neck. "Marry me again," she whispered. "Somewhere wild, somewhere loud." "Anywhere," he said. "Everywhere." They flew to Iceland in early spring, exchanged rings again under the northern lights, and wrote vows on the backs of napkins they'd stolen from the hotel bar. Tessa wore a wool coat. Felix wore hiking boots. They kissed beneath a frozen waterfall, and no one else was there to see it. Back in New York, life didn't slow down. The clinic opened its third branch. Margaret's house expanded to include a job training program. Felix's foundation funded 4 new shelters across the country. They didn't try to balance work and love. They let it blend messy and beautiful in the way real life always does. Some nights, they came home too tired to speak. Others, they stayed up until dawn tangled in each other, dreaming about what came next. Once, while waiting for a permit approval, Felix turned to her with a strange look in his eyes. "What?" she asked. "I think I want to be a father." She didn't blink. "Okay, you're not surprised. I've watched the way you look at every kid that walks through those clinic doors." He smiled, slow and certain. "So we'll try," she nodded. "We'll try." It didn't happen right away. They had setbacks, false starts. Quiet disappointments they never spoke of to anyone else. But they kept trying. And one morning, just as spring began to warm the trees lining their street, Tessa placed a small, white stick on the bathroom counter and waited. Felix found her sitting on the edge of the tub, hands shaking slightly. He knelt in front of her, took her hands in his and looked down at the test, and he laughed. Loud, broken, almost disbelieving, she started crying. Not the quiet kind, the kind that rattled her shoulders and made her bury her face in the crook of his neck. "I didn't think it would feel like this," she said. "Like what?" Like everything just clicked into place. He kissed her hair, held her close. 9 months later, their daughter arrived on a rainy afternoon. Tessa held her first, but Felix didn't let go of her hand the entire time. They named her Elena Margaret Stanton. The day they brought her home, the city outside buzzed the way it always did. But inside their apartment, everything was still. Felix stood by the window, Elena cradled in his arms, and whispered, "You'll never fall alone." Tessa came up behind him, wrapped her arms around his waist, and leaned her head against his back. They stayed like that for a long time, just the 3 of them, wrapped in warmth, wrapped in love. Wrapped in a life they'd built from the most unexpected moment of all. Not a stumble, but a fall right into forever.